Africa is a vast continent. It has a very long and complex history. This history is filled with stories of great kingdoms, rich cultures. It is also filled with stories of conflict and war. These wars have shaped the continent in many ways. They have changed borders, created new nations. They have influenced politics and economies for centuries. Understanding these conflicts is essential to understanding Africa itself. The story of Africa is not just one story. It is a collection of many different histories from many different places. Wars in Africa did not begin recently. They have been a part of the continent's story for thousands of years. Ancient empires rose and fell through conflict. Groups fought over land, resources, and power. The reasons for these wars were often complicated. They involved trade routes, control of valuable goods like gold, salt, and disputes between different ethnic groups. These early conflicts laid the foundation for future struggles. They created rivalries and alliances that would last for generations. The arrival of outsiders brought new kinds of wars. European powers came to Africa seeking wealth and territory. This period, known as the colonial era, was marked by violent conquest. Europeans used advanced weapons to defeat African armies. They drew new borders on maps without considering the people who lived there. These artificial boundaries often grouped rival communities together. They also split unified groups apart. This colonial legacy created deep-seated problems. It planted the seeds for many of the wars that would erupt after independence. The struggle for freedom was also a time of war. African people fought to end colonial rule. These wars for independence were fought across the continent, from Algeria in the north to Zimbabwe in the south. The fight was often long and brutal. Many people lost their lives fighting for self-determination. When independence was finally won, new challenges emerged. But the legacy of division and the struggle for power often led to new conflicts, this time between Africans themselves. In 1896 to 1897, Shona and Ndebele peoples in what is now Zimbabwe rose up against the British South Africa Company. This uprising is known as the First Chimurenga, or War of Liberation. The causes were numerous. The British had seized land, seized cattle, imposed a hut tax, and forced people into labor. The Chimurenga was heavily influenced by religious leaders. Spirit mediums like Mbuya Nahanda and Sekuru Kaguvi claimed the ancestors supported the war and that bullets of the white men would turn to water. This spiritual leadership united the Shona and Ndebele. They launched coordinated attacks, catching the small settler community by surprise. A few years later, a similar mass uprising erupted in German East Africa. The Maji Maji Rebellion was a direct response to harsh German colonial policies, forcing communities to grow cotton for export. Like the Chimurenga, the rebellion was united by a spiritual belief. A spirit medium named Kinjekitile Ngwale claimed to have a magic water, or Maji, that could turn German bullets into water. The German response was merciless. They adopted a scorched earth policy, creating a devastating famine that killed hundreds of thousands of people, far more than died in the actual fighting. The Second World War was a major turning point for Africa. Hundreds of thousands of African soldiers were recruited to fight for their colonial rulers. This experience changed their perspective completely. Fighting alongside European soldiers, they saw that these men were not superior beings. When they returned home, they began to demand these same freedoms for themselves and their own people. The war also weakened the great colonial powers of Britain and France. They were economically exhausted and no longer had the will to maintain vast overseas empires. In some colonies, the path to independence was relatively peaceful. Ghana became the first sub-Saharan African country to gain independence in 1957, under its charismatic leader Kwame Nkrumah. However, in many other parts of Africa, especially in colonies with large numbers of white settlers, the demand for independence was met with violent opposition, leaving nationalist movements with no choice but to take up arms. In Algeria, the National Liberation Front, the FLN, launched a brutal war for independence in 1954, using guerrilla warfare and urban terrorism. The French army responded with overwhelming force, mass arrests, and the systematic use of torture to break the FLN network. In 1962, Algeria gained independence after nearly 8 years of war and hundreds of thousands of deaths. In Kenya, the Mau Mau uprising emerged among the Kikuyu people to reclaim land taken by white settlers. The British responded with massive force, forcing over 1 million Kikuyu into fortified villages and holding tens of thousands in detention camps where torture and executions were common. Portugal was the last to let go, leading to long liberation wars in Angola, Mozambique, and Guinea-Bissau that lasted for over a decade. The wars became so unpopular they brought down the dictatorship in Portugal itself, in the nearly bloodless Carnation Revolution, finally leading to independence for the colonies. After the joy of independence, many new African nations faced immense challenges. The departing colonial powers left behind a difficult legacy. The borders they had drawn were artificial. This created immediate tension over who would control the new government and the nation's resources. The struggle for power often became a struggle between different ethnic or regional groups. The new states were also very fragile. Ambitious military leaders often saw this as an opportunity to seize power and coup d'état. The Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union made things worse. This foreign interference turned many local conflicts into proxy wars, making civil wars longer and more destructive. Another major cause of conflict was the fight over natural resources. Instead of bringing prosperity, this natural wealth became a curse, fueling endless cycles of violence. The Democratic Republic of Congo has suffered some of the most devastating conflicts. The trouble began almost immediately after independence from Belgium in 1960. A military leader named Mobutu Sese Seko seized power. He ruled as a dictator for over 3 decades, plundering its vast wealth. The 1994 Rwandan genocide set the stage for a new, much larger conflict, as millions of Rwandan Hutus fled into eastern Zaire. In 1996, Rwanda and its ally Uganda supported a Congolese rebel alliance to overthrow Mobutu. This began the First Congo War. But peace did not last. A new rebellion in 1998 marked the start of the Second Congo War, a conflict so complex it's sometimes called Africa's World War. The war was also a massive scramble for the DRC's rich mineral resources, diamonds, gold, and coltan. The war caused an estimated 5.4 million deaths, mostly from disease and starvation, making it the deadliest conflict in the world since World War II. The 1994 genocide in Rwanda was one of the darkest moments in modern history. In just 100 days, extremists from the Hutu majority slaughtered an estimated 800,000 people. This was a carefully planned campaign. Hutu extremists used radio stations and newspapers to spread hate propaganda, dehumanizing Tutsis. The genocide was triggered on April 6, 1994, when a plane carrying the president of Rwanda was shot down. Within hours, roadblocks were set up. Soldiers, police, and Interahamwe militias began systematically killing Tutsis, using lists of names to identify their victims. The international community failed to intervene. A small United Nations peacekeeping force was present, but was not given the mandate to stop the killing. The genocide was only stopped when the RPF rebel army fought its way across the country and captured Kigali. The most immediate and devastating impact of war in Africa is the staggering loss of human life. Beyond the deaths, war creates a massive crisis of displacement. Life in a refugee or IDP camp is a daily struggle for survival, with limited access to clean water, food, and sanitation. For the millions living in these camps, life is put on hold. Children cannot go to school, losing out on their education. The psychological trauma of war leaves deep and lasting scars on individuals who have witnessed horrific violence or lost loved ones. Child soldiers, forced to commit terrible acts, are robbed of their innocence and face a difficult road to reintegration into society. War is the enemy of prosperity. Physical infrastructure becomes a primary target. Roads are destroyed, bridges are destroyed, farmers abandon their fields. That leads to food shortages and widespread famine. Conflict frightens away investment. Foreign companies pull out. No new jobs are created. Wars leave deep and poisonous scars on the fabric of society. They destroy the trust that holds communities together. The authority of elders is often undermined by young men with guns. This leads to a breakdown of law and order. Yet, it is not the only story. Across the continent, there is a powerful and growing movement towards peace and stability. In recent decades, there has been a noticeable decline in the number of large-scale civil wars. The African Union has become more active in conflict resolution. Its principle of non-indifference is a significant change from the past. It has developed its own peacekeeping forces and mediation teams. Grassroots peace movements have also been vital. Community leaders, women's groups, and religious figures have worked at the local level to reconcile former enemies. Despite dark chapters, Africa's story is one of resilience and hope. The continent is young, dynamic, and full of potential. Build strong, accountable institutions. Create economies that provide opportunities for all. These are essential for preventing conflict. Peace and development are two sides of the same coin. By learning from the past, we can support the millions of Africans working to build a more peaceful and prosperous future. The hope, the 21st century becomes the century Africa's promise is realized. A promise built on the hard-won lessons of its history.